The tears threatened to spill, but I blinked them back, determined to keep my composure. "But we have history," I protested, my voice trembling. 3 years, Lucas. All those memories. All our plans. I couldn't stop myself from recalling the day he first kissed me, back when we were 17. It was behind the bleachers after football practice, the metal cold against my back, but his Letterman jacket draped over my shoulders kept me warm. His hands trembled slightly as he cupped my face, the faint scent of freshly cut grass clinging to his practice clothes. It was perfect, simple, pure, and new. Now, at 20, everything felt different. I caught myself staring at my phone more than at him when we were together. What used to feel like magic had dulled into a predictable routine. Our Friday nights, once filled with adventure, speeding through town in his beat-up Corolla, sharing fries at the diner on 5th Street, kissing in empty parking lots under flickering streetlights, had become stale. These days, we sat silently on his parents' couch, the droning of the TV filling the space where conversation used to be, our phones a barrier between us. Even our kisses had lost their spark, mechanical and obligatory, as though we were reenacting something we thought we should feel. Last weekend, I poured my heart out to Emily over coffee at our favorite downtown cafe. The buzz of the Saturday morning crowd and the sweet aroma of fresh pastries surrounded us, but my thoughts were elsewhere. The barista handed me my usual vanilla latte without needing to ask, and I stirred it absently while describing how Lucas and I barely talked anymore. Our once vivid connection now felt faded and hollow. "Maybe you need to spice things up," Emily suggested, her perfectly manicured nails clicking lightly against her cup. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "Have you ever thought about opening up your relationship?" I nearly choked on my latte. "Seeing other people? Are you serious?" "Yeah, but ethically. Both of you agree to it. Set boundaries. It's not cheating if everyone's honest," she said, her tone matter-of-fact. "My cousin tried it with her boyfriend. She said it actually made them appreciate each other more." Her words stayed with me, lodging themselves in my mind like a seed that refused to be uprooted. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom surrounded by photos of Lucas and me at football games and prom, I couldn't stop scrolling through articles about open relationships. The idea made sense in theory. We could explore, grow, and experience more, all while staying anchored to one another. We wouldn't have to throw away 3 years of love and memories just because we were curious about the unknown. It took a week of convincing. I approached the topic gently, planting subtle hints during lunch at the campus cafe, between classes, or while curled up next to him on his parents' couch. "Just think about it," I'd say, watching his face carefully. "We're only 20. Shouldn't we experience more before settling down?" Each time, his warm brown eyes clouded with worry. But I pressed on, painting him vivid pictures of adventure, freedom, and a stronger, more secure us. "It'll make us appreciate each other more," I assured him one night over pizza at Mario's, our old sophomore year hangout. "We'll know we're choosing each other over anyone else." Last night, he finally agreed. We were sitting in his car outside my apartment, the streetlight casting faint shadows across his face. His familiar features looked strange to me in that moment, both familiar and foreign. "If this is what you really want," he said quietly, his fingers drumming nervously on the steering wheel. Relief and excitement flooded me as I leaned over to kiss him. "It'll be perfect," I whispered, a promise heavy with hope. But as I look back now, I wonder if I saw the doubt in his eyes and ignored it, blinded by the thrill of the unknown. Perhaps I was too caught up in chasing something new to realize I might be breaking something that didn't need fixing. For Lucas, her suggestion landed like an unexpected weight, pressing down on him with the heaviness of an unsolved problem. The thought of opening their relationship felt daunting. It wasn't that he didn't want Sophia to feel fulfilled or happy. He just didn't know if he was ready for such unfamiliar territory. During dinner, while Sophia animatedly described her vision of freedom and growth, Lucas picked at his food, her excitement in sharp contrast to the knot tightening in his chest. He wanted to support her, to make her happy. But deep down, a quiet voice whispered that this might be a path they couldn't return from. He voiced his fears to Ryan while shooting hoops in his driveway, the familiar sound of the ball bouncing against the pavement grounding him. "Man, that's how relationships end," Ryan said, his missed three-pointer rolling into the grass. "Once you open that door, you can't close it." Ryan's words echoed in Lucas's mind as he watched Sophia's eyes light up whenever she talked about the idea. That sparkle, a brightness that had been missing for months, was back, but it wasn't for him. And yet, he caved. In the car, outside her apartment, he gave her the answer she wanted to hear, even as a deep unease settled in his chest. Looking back, Lucas wondered if she noticed his hesitation, or if he masked it well enough to convince them both. For 3 nights in a row, I barely touched my dinner, the food on my plate growing cold as I wrestled with the weight of my thoughts. My mom's concerned voice echoed through the kitchen. "Did you two have a fight?" she asked, her eyes scanning my face for answers I wasn't ready to give. Dad, on the other hand, tried to slip in advice during our weekend car maintenance session, his hands smudged with oil as he spoke about relationships and compromise. "But how do you explain to your father that your high school sweetheart, the girl you thought you'd marry one day, now wants to date other people?" Each time Sophia brought up the idea, my resolve cracked a little more, like a spreading fracture on a windshield. At first, it felt slow, almost imperceptible, but then it became impossible to ignore. Her arguments began to sound convincing, or maybe I was just too tired of resisting. Last night, I finally gave in. We were parked outside her apartment, the same spot where I'd first told her I loved her 2 years ago. I still remembered the way her face lit up then, her laughter breaking the silence of the night. But now, as she turned to me with those big green eyes that had once gotten me into trouble and had always made me feel invincible, I felt none of that warmth. The streetlight above us cast faint golden flecks in her gaze, but the moment felt heavier than it should have. "If this is what you want," I said, the words like lead in my mouth. She smiled, a radiant, hopeful smile, as if I had just handed her the keys to a brighter future. I watched her walk to her door, her sundress swaying gently with each step. Memories of our first date at the carnival rushed back, the way my palms had been sweaty with nerves when I reached for her hand on the Ferris wheel. Now, here I was, agreeing to let her hold someone else's hand, and the thought made my stomach churn. Later that night, I lay in bed staring at the photo on my nightstand. It was from prom, her in that blue dress that matched my tie perfectly, the two of us grinning like we had the whole world figured out. I couldn't shake the sinking feeling that this was the beginning of the end. Maybe I was too afraid of losing her to admit it, or maybe I was just trying to convince myself I could handle the impossible. Dating Nathan began simply enough. Coffee breaks at work turned into longer lunches, and before long, we were meeting after hours. He had this polished charm about him, crisp shirts, a perfectly styled haircut, and an expensive cologne that lingered in the air like a promise. At first, it felt like stepping into a scene from one of the romance novels I used to devour. There was no history weighing us down, no expectations to live up to, just the thrill of something new. Our first kiss happened in the parking garage after work, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead as his lips met mine. It was a far cry from the soft, hesitant kisses I shared with Lucas behind the bleachers in high school. Nathan's confidence was intoxicating, his touch practiced and deliberate. I felt sophisticated, like I was living a different life, one I thought I wanted. But as things escalated, dinners at trendy restaurants, nights spent tangled in his expensive sheets, I began to notice something missing. The sex was flawless, technically perfect even, but afterward, I lay there feeling hollow. It was an emptiness I couldn't quite explain, and in the stillness of those moments, my thoughts drifted back to Lucas. I missed the way he'd absent-mindedly play with my hair while we watched TV. I missed how he always remembered to order extra pickles for me, even though he hated them. I missed the sound of his laugh, the unrestrained, boyish kind that made everyone around him smile. Nathan never laughed like that. Everything about him felt curated, calculated. He was polished to perfection, but Lucas was real. Last week, sitting across from Nathan at a fancy restaurant, I found myself checking my phone, hoping for a text from Lucas. The restaurant was the kind of place Lucas and I would have only visited on special occasions, where we'd laugh about the tiny portions and mispronounce the names of the dishes just to amuse ourselves. With Nathan, it felt sterile, more like a business meeting than a romantic dinner. That's when I realized this experiment wasn't solving anything. Instead of feeling liberated, I felt lost. The excitement of something new had faded, leaving me longing for the imperfect but irreplaceable love I'd had with Lucas. Yesterday, I finally decided to tell him. I planned everything meticulously, inviting him to meet me at the lake, our old spot. I even wore his favorite sundress, the one he always said made me look like a dream. The setting sun painted the sky in soft pinks and golds, the air thick with nostalgia and hope. I think we should go back to being exclusive, I said, my heart pounding. I miss us. His response felt like a punch to the gut. I've just started enjoying it, he said quietly, not meeting my eyes. I've been seeing Emily Miller, and Hannah from chemistry class, and Olivia from Spanish club. Each name hit me like a wave, the impact growing stronger with every word. These weren't strangers, they were girls from our past, girls who had seen us at our best. Prom queens and study partners, the same people who had watched us thrive as a couple. Now, they were part of his life in a way I never imagined. They're not just hookups, he continued, his voice steady in a way that scared me. I'm actually connecting with them. I sat there, stunned, as the sun dipped below the horizon, bleeding the sky into a deep crimson. All those nights I'd imagined him missing me, pining for me, he'd been out building something new, without me. The realization made my chest ache, my stomach twist. I had gambled with our relationship, and I'd lost. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. But maybe, deep down, I had known all along that the moment we opened the door, there'd be no way to close it. For 3 nights, I picked at my dinner, pushing food around my plate as my appetite vanished into the weight of unspoken worries. My mom noticed first, her voice soft yet probing. "Did you two have a fight?" she asked, her eyes searching mine for answers I couldn't give. Dad tried his hand at subtlety during our usual weekend car maintenance, slipping relationship advice into the gaps between oil changes and tire checks. I listened in silence, but how could I explain to him that the girl I'd planned a future with, the girl who once made me feel like the luckiest guy in the world, now wanted to date other people? Every time Sophia brought it up, I resisted. At first, my resolve felt unshakable, but with each conversation, it cracked, splintering slowly before spreading like a spiderweb across glass. Her arguments started to make a strange kind of sense, or maybe I was just exhausted from fighting something she seemed so sure about. Last night, I finally gave in. We sat parked outside her apartment, the same spot where I'd first told her I loved her 2 years ago. The memory of that night still lingered in the air, the laughter, the nervous excitement, the way her green eyes sparkled when she said it back. But now, those same eyes looked at me, pleading, hopeful, but distant. The streetlight above us caught the tiny flecks of gold in her gaze, a detail I'd always admired but now felt hollow. "If this is what you want," I said, the words heavy and foreign in my mouth. She smiled, a radiant, relieved smile, as if I'd just handed her the gift she'd been waiting for. But as I watched her walk to her door, the sway of her sundress a bittersweet reminder of happier times, I couldn't shake the sinking feeling that everything was about to change. Memories of our first date at the carnival flooded back, the way I had worked up the nerve to hold her hand on the Ferris wheel, her laughter making me feel invincible. Now, I was letting go, giving her the freedom she wanted, and it terrified me more than any carnival ride ever could. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the photo on my nightstand. It was from prom, her in that stunning blue dress that matched my tie, both of us grinning like we had the whole world at our feet. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on me as I realized that this might be the beginning of the end. Maybe I was just too afraid of losing her to admit it. Sophia had always known what she wanted, or at least she seemed to. Dating Nathan from work had started innocently enough, with shared coffee breaks that turned into long lunches and eventually after-work meetups. Nathan was everything Lucas wasn't, polished, poised, and exuding the kind of confidence that came with crisp shirts, a perfect haircut, and cologne that lingered long after he left. At first, being with him felt exhilarating, like stepping into a glossy romance novel with no strings attached. Their first kiss happened in the parking garage, his practiced movements a stark contrast to Lucas's endearing hesitance. Nathan made her feel sophisticated, worldly, like she was finally living a life she'd always dreamed of. But as their relationship deepened, the thrill began to fade. Dinners at trendy restaurants felt more like transactions than moments of connection. The sex, while flawless, left her feeling hollow, and in those quiet moments afterward, her mind wandered back to Lucas. She missed the way Lucas would absent-mindedly play with her hair while they watched TV, how he always remembered to order extra pickles for her, even though he hated them. She missed his laugh, that unfiltered, joyous sound that could light up a room. Nathan never laughed like that. He was too polished, too calculated, and it was starting to feel suffocating. One night, sitting across from Nathan at an upscale restaurant, Sophia found herself glancing at her phone, hoping for a message from Lucas. It hit her then, this wasn't what she wanted. The freedom she'd sought had turned into a void, and the man she thought she'd outgrown was the one she needed most. When she invited Lucas to the lake, their spot, she planned every detail, down to the sundress he used to love. The setting sun bathed the water in golden light, casting a warm glow over the scene as she rehearsed her speech in her head. She told him she wanted to go back to being exclusive, her heart pounding with hope. But the Lucas who showed up wasn't the boy she'd left behind. He stood taller, more confident, wearing a jacket she didn't recognize and a calm, self-assured energy that made him seem like a stranger. His words were steady, deliberate. "You were right," he said. "We did need to grow. But we don't need to come back to each other." He spoke of Emily, Hannah, and Olivia. Names that felt like daggers, each one representing a new connection, a new chapter that didn't include her. The realization hit like a tidal wave. While she had been playing at sophistication with Nathan, Lucas had been building something real with women who appreciated him for who he had become. He wasn't the shy boy she'd once molded to her liking. He had grown into someone new, someone who no longer needed her to complete him. She tried one last time to salvage what they had, inviting him to her apartment, cooking his favorite meal, and arranging the space just the way he liked it. But when he arrived, he didn't sit. He leaned against the counter, his posture casual yet unyielding, as he gently explained that they couldn't go back. "History isn't enough of a reason to go backward," he said, his words cutting deeper than he could have known. As he walked out the door, she watched, unable to call him back. He wasn't hers anymore. The boy who had once lived for her approval had grown into a man who knew his worth, and it wasn't tied to her. Alone in her kitchen, surrounded by cold pasta and fading memories, Sophia finally understood the depth of her mistake. She had wished for freedom, excitement, and change. She had gotten it all, but at the cost of the one thing she truly needed. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. And some lessons, as she learned too late, come with a price too heavy to bear.